Hey everybody, this is Mike, and you're watching the Reelblack podcast. Today we've got a Philly favorite, Christina Faith, who's got a brand new movie called "Love You Right," an R&B type musical.
The multi-platinum selling heartthrob of our generation, the amazing and now controversial Will Clay.
These new artists, man, they don't know nothing about anticipation. I'ma have these hoes fiending for me.
Birthday to you. Take it slowly. I do. Said you like it. This is business.
It's a 360. I don't do those. We want to focus on the album.
Oh my God.
Listen, Will's next album is already sounding like another classic, and it's projected to be his best-selling project thus far.
Like, why is she coming to his defense when he cheated on her?
So, about these contracts.
Can I please crack this head?
Put your trust in God.
I'm here to get you booked, laid, and paid, baby.
Open the door. I need to know you're all right.
You gotta do some therapy, okay, so that you can love you like you love you like you love you.
How you doing today?
I'm doing good, sir. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much. This is an honor and a privilege.
Yeah, and a long time coming. I know you've been working on this movie for a while. Can you give a synopsis? Let people know about it. I know they've seen the trailer, but
yeah. So it's the story "Love You Right," an R&B musical, is a story about Will Clay. Right, Will Clay is a fictional R&B superstar, and so me and my co-writer Marquise, we wanted to figure out like what would it be like to go behind the scenes of a fictional character that's a superstar in our today's social media life, but also somebody who was a bit older who didn't expose their life so much. And so we go through his ups, his downs, his issues of fame, love, and just him finding himself and doing the things that makes him happy as opposed to what everyone wants from him.
wonderful. And you have an amazing cast. It was all shot in Philly, correct?
85%. The other part, we had to shoot a few things in Maryland, and we shot a few things in North Jersey, and then one scene was in Delaware. So those were just locations that just didn't work out in Philly was all.
Okay, but this is for those watching. This is a Philly filmmaker. We got to support this.
This is Philly to the death.
Tell us about your cast and your collaborators.
Yeah, so Mark J.P. Hood is our lead character, and he was on The Voice. He's on Black Monday currently. He's on The Resident. And so he's been around for a long time. Mark is a singing actor, and he sings and acts very well. The cool thing about Mark is that I slid in his DMs, and I was like, hey, I have this movie. Are you interested? And he had everything that we needed. He needed to be able to dance, sing, and act. And so he performed crazy. We have Malaya S. Gregory, who's a Philadelphia native, who was in my show Single and Anxious. We have Mason Naima, who's from North Jersey. She's actually a detective for Newark Police Department. And so she was in something else of mine. Who else do we have? We have Brian A. Wilson. We have Tiffany Bacon, Philly's own. And so I really tried to cast this from a perspective of trying to find as many people in the tri-state area as I could. Mark is unfortunately, fortunately, from Chicago, but Chicago is a crazy supporter of Philadelphia as well. And I think we have some of the same struggles in some sense creatively. So it was really a delight. It's a musical, and so we got Crystal Typewriter Oliver to write most of the songs, along with Christopher Stevens, who produced and did the score. He's a Philly trumpeter who plays with John Legend and so many others. And then we also have Ivan Barrios, who is also a crazy Grammy-nominated producer who has produced almost everyone from Philly, Jill Scott, Music Soul Child, and the list goes on and on.
Yeah, I was going to say the soundtrack is dope. I mean, are there plans to release it separately or?
Yeah, so the soundtrack will be released separately. The first song off the soundtrack is going to be All Over Me, which features Leah Janae, who was on The Four, who's a fan favorite as well, and Mark J.P. Hood. And so, yeah, the music is amazing, I will say. And music is my first love, and so this was really cool to make something with such timeless music.
Well, talk about that. Because I know Creative Thought Media, and you've done webisodes and documentaries. This is your first feature. I mean, how did you get into film? There are a lot of people that are watching that are like looking to make their first feature or even break into the industry. What's your backstory?
Well, So I went to undergrad for criminal justice and African studies, and I minored in English and criminology. I went to Rutgers, and then I got my master's in divinity. While I was in my master's program, I realized I had this insatiable desire for media. But when I started to look back on my life, at the age of 6 years old, I got a Sony Walkman and I lived in my headphones. I remember Michael Jackson Bad was the first cassette player that taped, I think it was Bad, that I ever got. And so when I was younger, I started writing music, and then I started writing stories. And growing up, everyone would tell my mother, get her into some type of entertainment, like acting, something. And I never wanted to be put on display type child, so I always resisted. But when I was around 20, how old was I? Wow. When I was at 25, 26, I shot my first music video, and from there it was over. I had bought a camera because someone was like, oh, I see you with a camera. And so I finally was like, all right, forget it. I'm going to get a camera. And so I hadn't shot anything with it yet. And I asked my friend, I said, hey, let's go shoot a music video for your new song. And so we shot it right there on 16th and Diamond. It was a house that was going to get torn down soon. And the song was called House of Pain. And it was a really good music video, and people liked it. And I got one of my earlier friends who was already in film. He had walked me through the editing process. And because I was a recording engineer, it was easy to transition over into editing film. And so I started there. And as the time went on, I realized, probably after doing services for others for about 7 years, I realized I wanted to tell narrative-based stories. And so that's where Singular Anxious, our digital series, came about. And what I did with that one, if people want to know, is I used that as my film school, right? Every summer we would shoot an episode, we would shoot a season, and then we would post-production and we would release it. And we would do that with short films in between while we were still doing services, and we just kept doing it over and over for 3 summers. We did that. We went to American Black Film Festival back in 2018, and you get to go into these rooms, and I was an ambassador for a Motion Picture Association as a part of the diversity and inclusion program, and so I'm now able to go in places that I wouldn't be able to go before. So I'm in a meeting with Netflix, and they asked all the filmmakers, how many people have features, how many people have short films, and then she said, how many people have web series? And then she was like, I'm not asking that question. Filmmakers, stop making web series. We can't license them, we can't buy them, was pretty much what she was saying. And then I said, at that moment, June 2018, all right, my next thing is a feature. I went back to the Airbnb, and I thought of literally the title Love You Right. And I thought about my top 5 movies that I loved, that they were all musicals, and I was like, all right, well, let's make a musical.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, what are the challenges making the transition from short form to long form? There's
a lot of challenges.
What did you not expect?
I think with short form, you don't have to complete the story in a sense, because you're continuously telling the story. So if you make a mistake, you can evolve it somewhere down the line and fix it. With long form, I think the hardest part was going from writing 25 pages per episode to 140 pages flat, right? Beginning, middle, and ending. Our first draft, we wrote 90 pages, and we scrapped the entire thing and started over. I think that was the hardest thing. And now that I'm writing my second feature, it's a lot easier, because I know that the story needs to move like this. So I had to figure out and learn how story moved in movies as opposed to how story moved in series. Because I'm personally I gravitate more towards telling serial content than feature content. And so the hardest thing was making sure that it flowed from beginning to end, where it didn't have any lagging in it.
Right. Well, no, I think you did a great job with everything, the way, the style, the flow, and then the insight into the character. There's a lot of inside baseball. It feels like it's an inside show business story, but then it's also very accessible. I mean, can you talk about the nature of celebrity today and how that influenced the way you depict your characters?
So accessibility was actually a very big piece of this film, right? We researched Prince, Michael Jackson, and Marvin Gaye. Me and Marquise watched a lot of their films because what we wanted to see was like, how do we take a person who has allowed themselves not to be accessible and then now you're accessible and you're exposed. And I really wanted to touch on the idea of what celebrity looks like. And then from that, we pulled, for example, Kevin Hart, who was, hidden and then exposed with the scandal that he had that occurred. And so celebrity is very interesting. I often think of things like, not just Beyonce got to put on her pants the same way that we do, but she goes to the bathroom the same way that we do, right? And so a lot of times we elevate celebrities instead of realizing they're regular people who need love too. And then I think that way we can have more empathy for them. Oftentimes when a celebrity falls, we're like, well, how did this happen? They're human, right? They're prone to have issues and flaws the same way everyone is. No matter how grave they are, they're humans, but we've put them on a pedestal. And so I wanted to knock this character off the pedestal, but I also wanted to show that he had self-reflection of figuring out his life and just, decisions and things that he made. And so oftentimes celebrities, what we're showing on the other side is that they don't listen to their friends and family. So I want to see, okay, well, what if he had good friends and family as opposed to complete, foolishness behind the scenes?
Right. Well, it's interesting. You said you majored in divinity.
I did.
And there's a little, and your last name, there's some faith-based themes that come up in the film. Can you speak to the importance of that?
Well, I think you're right what you are, right? So my name is Christina Faith. That's my first and middle name. And my brother's names are Muslim names. And so my mother didn't have a strong faith when she had me. It's just, she was like, it took like 10 days to name me. She opened the Bible and she said Christina. She don't know where she got it from. My grandfather walked in the door and said, I like the middle name Faith. And so that's where that came from. But I think that in general, at some point, you tell what you believe, whether or not you're doing it intentionally or unintentionally. I kind of wanted to almost like, I did this with the gaze of the 90s. So think R&B albums, right? And so that's literally how we tried to do this. At the end of every R&B album is a faith song, generally from the 90s and early 2000s. And so that's kind of like where that portion came from. And then wanting him to have something that could ground him. And so that was where we decided to bring the grounding from, was from his faith and from his upbringing. Right.
So in closing, where can people see the film and what's next?
What's next? All right,
well, where can people see the film first? That's more important.
Where can people see the film first?
Cha-ching, ching.
So, you can see the film Love You Right, an R&B musical or R&B type musical, whichever one you want to put in. They all come up on the search. You can see it on iTunes, Amazon, Fandango, Verizon, DirecTV, Dish. It's everywhere, right? If you type it in, it's going to pop up, and it's available on any of your devices. If you have a Roku, it's on there as well as a Fire Stick. You can also rent it or purchase it. We prefer that you purchase it because, we get a nice little chunk of it. We did do our own distribution, and so we're set up for winning, not for failing. The first single, All Over Me, will be available on all streaming platforms. What's next? We're working on a new feature film. I'm currently writing it. It's my coming of age story, which is a very interesting story. And so I'm really excited about that. And I'm looking forward to hopefully directing my first episode of television soon.
Fantastic. Well, all the best to you and congratulations. I can't wait I can't wait to see the next one. Hopefully it also grounds some Philly talent into it. I will always ground the tri-state area. I'm really trying to, one of the things that I'm really going to be pushing for as my career progresses is that we fix this whole film tax thing. That's the only reason Philly isn't highlighted. And so the more awareness that we can bring, the more our industry can grow here. Fantastic. Is there anything I forgot to mention or ask? No, I think that's it. LoveYouRight.com. That's about it. You can follow me on Twitter or on Instagram at Christina Faith, as well as the film at Love You, the letter U, Right Film on all platforms. Wonderful. Well, congratulations, Christina Faith. Thank you so much for having me. Co-writer and director of Love You Right, an R&B musical.
I don't need steak and eggs or breakfast in bed, 'cause you always keep me satisfied, keep my
just need you. So you're the first thing on my mind, the last thing that I wanna do. Yeah. So when I'm lonely and I need your touch, you're the only feeling I want.
So baby,
just
put your hands